Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your night to join us for tonight's public hearing. This is a public hearing for an Eagle Industrial Stormwater Permit application submitted by Holtec Palisades for the Palisades Power Plant, NPDES permit MI 0001457 in Covert, Van Buren County. My name is Ryan Blazik. I'm with Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I'm just going to be your moderator tonight. But before we get too far, I'm just going to go over a couple things. First off is just our agenda. This is what we're going to be going through tonight. We're going to start off with an introduction that we're doing right now. Then we're going to move into an informational session where Eagle is going to describe the proposed reissuance and provide some information on the reissuance process. And then we're going to go into a question and answer session. So you'll have an opportunity to ask a question on this application. And then we're going to talk about the ways to submit official comments, including the making a statement tonight for the official hearing, which is the second part. So we're going to start off with an informational session, Q&A. Then we're going to go on to the hearing part where everyone will have an opportunity to make a statement on this application. And then we're also going to cover who to contact in case you have any further questions. All right, in case you haven't joined us for one of our public hearings that we do virtually before, all lines aren't going to be muted during the hearing, so you'll be able to hear us, but we can't hear you. You can submit a question at any time using the Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar. We'll answer those questions that we have after that informational session that we talked about. We will also allow you to raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you to ask your question at that time. And we'll explain how we're going to do that again, but we'll take questions both ways at that time. And then also, just so everyone is aware, we are recording this hearing. It'll be on our YouTube channel in a couple days, so you'll be able to watch it again or forward it on if you so choose. All right, this is a list of our Eagle staff who are on the line tonight. I'm just going to go ahead and read them off, and they're going to just put their cameras on quick so you can see who's who here. I'm going to start off with myself, Ryan Blazik. I am the facilitator, hearings officer, and moderator today. I'm with Water Resources, or I'm with the outreach specialist for Water Resources Division and Environmental Support Division. Next up is Chris Alexander, who's with Water Resources Division's permit section. She's the supervisor. And then we have Tarek Buckmaster, who is in the Industrial Permits Unit supervisor. All right, Tarek is next. And then Betsy McKay, who is with the Industrial Permits Unit, and she is the permit writer. All right, thank you, Betsy. And then we have Jennifer Klang, who's the supervisor with Water Resources Division, the Kalamazoo District Office. Welcome, Jennifer. Jeremy Rubio, who is the Kalamazoo District Office compliance staff. Hey, Jeremy. We have T.R. Wentworth is next, who's the Radiological Protection Section Supervisor. So T.R., there you are. Thank you very much. And then Jay Paquette, who's with Radioactive Materials Unit, the Supervisor. All right, thank you, Jay. And that's all of our Eagle staff. Thanks for turning your cameras on for those introductions. We also have some U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff, some NRC staff who are on the line. First up is Jason Kozel, who's the Director of the Division of Operating Reactor Safety with NRC Region 3. Thanks for joining us, Jason. And then Mary Richmond, who is the Environmental Project Manager, the Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Safeguards.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. All right. All right, so we're going to move right into our presentation today. So I've got your slides here, Betsy. Feel free to just let me know when you want me to change them for you.
Thanks, Ryan. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Betsy McKay, and I am a permit writer in the Industrial Permits Unit in the Water Resources Division. Today, I will be presenting on the proposed reissuance of the NPDES permit for Holtec Palisades LLC's Palisades Power Plant. Next slide, please. Before jumping into the permit, I wanted to provide some more background information about the Industrial Permits Unit and where we fit in Michigan's government. We are part of the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EGLE. EGLE's job is to protect Michigan's environment and public health by managing air, water, land, and energy resources. Next slide. Within EGLE, we are part of the Water Resources Division. Water Resources Division is tasked with ensuring Michigan's waters are safe and clean for what we call protected uses, which include things like drinking, recreation, fishing, and a healthy overall aquatic ecosystem. Water Resources Division has a variety of programs such as wetland and floodplain regulation, critical dune protection, and permit issuance, which we will discuss today. Next slide, please. Within Water Resources Division, we are part of Permits section, which is responsible for issuance of all wastewater discharge permits to both surface and groundwaters of the state of Michigan. The Industrial Permits Unit issues a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, permits for wastewater discharges from industrial and commercial facilities to surface waters of the state under the Federal Clean Water Act and state law. This includes a wide range of facilities such as steam electric power plants, sand and gravel mines, manufacturing facilities, contaminated groundwater treatment systems, and construction projects, just to name a few. Next slide. We issue permits under the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, or NREPA 451. Part 31, Water Resources Protection of NREPA, regulates all wastewater discharges in the state of Michigan. Within Part 31, there are a number of rules that have been promulgated. In particular, we operate under the Part 21 wastewater discharge permit rules that set out standards for NPDES permits, and the Part 4 water quality standards and Part 8 water quality-based effluent development for toxic substances rules, all of which allow Water Resources Division to implement the law. That is, they provide the specifics of how to do it. Next slide, please. The Industrial Permits Unit issues industrial surface water permits only, and today we will be discussing industrial surface water discharge permits only. We like to remind people that an industrial surface water discharge permit does not eliminate the need to obtain any other permits or approvals from other units of government. The industrial surface water discharge permit is just one piece of the puzzle. We only administer the Part 21 rules along with the rules for water quality standards and effluent limitation development in accordance with federal NPDES permitting requirements. Next slide, please. The NPDES permitting process regulates the discharge of pollutants into the surface waters of the state. The permits include multiple mechanisms for controlling the discharge of pollutants, such as effluent limitations, monitoring requirements, and other conditions for site-specific concerns. The two types of standards used to develop limitations for a proposed discharge include treatment technology-based standards and water quality-based standards. For treatment technology-based standards, EPA develops effluent limitation guidelines, or ELGs, for specific industries. These ELGs set industry-wide standards that all wastewater dischargers must attain. ELGs are often based upon treatment technologies, but do not specify the type of treatment needed to be used to meet the standard. The other standards used are water quality-based standards, which are developed through a site-specific evaluation of water conditions at the discharge point to waters of the state. Next slide, please. Again, the treatment technology-based standards are based upon a national evaluation of a specific industry and the treatment technologies used at these facilities. The department evaluates the effluent limitation guidelines, or ELGs, developed by EPA for a specific industry and implements these national standards, typically numeric effluent limitations, in an NPDES permit. The ELGs for the steam electric power generating point source category are applicable to the Palisades Power Plant, and so were utilized to develop limits for this permit reissuance. Next slide, please. Water quality-based standards are established to protect the designated uses of our surface waters. This includes uses such as fishing, swimming, and aquatic life. Our biologists and engineers use a variety of information from the application and existing site-specific water quality data, and they recommend limitations for parameters that are expected to be present at levels of concern. Next slide. In general, draft NPDES permits are developed using information submitted in the application documents and recommendations provided from the water quality-based reviews and treatment technology-based reviews. In cases where recommendations for the same parameter are developed for both sets of standards, the more stringent value is included in the permit. For example, if the water quality-based limitation for a specific parameter is 10 milligrams per liter, and the treatment technology-based limitation is 5 milligrams per liter, we are required to include the 5 milligram per liter limitation in the permit so that the permit is protective of both standards. Other monitoring requirements and effluent limitations included in the permit are also reviewed for consistency with other similar types of discharges. Next slide. During each permit reissuance, the department reevaluates information on the discharge from the facility, reviews any permit violations, and conducts site inspections. The department then determines whether any requirements need to be added to the permit to meet permitting requirements or to protect water quality. Also, the department will remove any requirements from the permit that have been determined no longer to be necessary to ensure the discharge meets standards. Next slide, please. Now, with all of that in mind, we'll move on to the proposed reissuance of the NPDES permit for Palisades Power Plant. On this slide, there is a map where you can see the outfall and surface water intake locations at the plant. Outfall 1 discharges to Lake Michigan. Next slide, please. Palisades Power Plant began construction in 1967 and began operation in 1971. The NPDES permit has been reissued many times since its initial issuance. Palisades ceased operation in May 2022, but is now seeking to resume operation in late 2025. Now I would like to highlight some of the modifications made to the previously issued permit during this reissuance process. At Outfall 1, monitoring point 1A, limits have been added for hydrazine, and reporting requirements have been added for chloride and sulfate. At Outfall 1, monitoring point 1F, the monitoring frequency for total suspended solids has been increased from annually to monthly. Next slide, please. Intake structure monitoring requirements now include intake flow and intake observation reporting. And several permit conditions have been added or revised, including intake structure monitoring, which was revised from the condition intake screen backwash Outfall 1 in the previous permit. The cooling water intake structure condition was revised. Pollutant minimization programs for hydrazine and Spectra CT 1300 have been added, and a plant startup notification requirement has been added. The draft permit also reflects the transfer of ownership of the plant from Entergy Nuclear Palisades LLC to Holtec Palisades LLC. Next slide, please. The reissuance of this NPDES permit is not directly related to the plans to restart the plant. It's just the regularly scheduled reissuance process that NPDES permits go through every 5 years, and this reissuance process would be happening regardless of whether there were plans to restart the plant. The draft permit accounts for the current decommissioning status of the plant, as well as for the possibility of the plant resuming operations. While in the decommissioning state, the plant continues to require the use of cooling water and continues to discharge to Lake Michigan, so the requirements in the NPDES permit are similar whether the plant is operating or not. If or when the plant resumes operations, Palisades shall notify Eagle at least 30 days prior to plant startup, and the cooling water intake structure inspection, which is required every 3 years while the plant is not operating, will be required annually if the plant restarts. Next slide, please. Now that we have reviewed some of the modifications made to the previously issued permit during this reissuance process, I would like to briefly address the discharge of treated rad waste wastewater. Treated rad waste wastewater is discharged through Outfall 1 and monitored at monitoring points 1D and 1A. Treated rad waste wastewater refers to wastewater streams that have been treated to remove radioactivity. The image on the right is a generic diagram of a steam electric nuclear power plant. There are 2 circuits. The first of these, shown in pink, is for water that is directly heated by the reactor. The second, shown in blue, is for water used to cool the reactor circuit. These circuits are isolated, meaning the water used for cooling purposes does not come into direct contact with the reactor. The NPDES permit authorizes the discharge of wastewater from the second cooling water circuit. Rad wastewater is not considered radioactive waste, either high level or low level. Next slide, please. All radiological aspects of the plant are regulated by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. EGLE does not have authority under Part 31 to regulate the discharge of radioactive waste. Under their NRC license, however, Palisades Power Plant treats rad wastewater to remove radioactivity and tests the effluent for radioactivity before release. They are also required to document any known discharges of radioactivity. In addition, when the plant is operational, the NRC has a resident inspector who works on site full-time. The inspector's responsibilities include tracking and oversight of any potential release. While the plant has been in a state of decommissioning, there has not been an NRC inspector at the plant full-time, but NRC inspectors have been on site intermittently throughout the plant decommissioning and preparing for startup. EGLE staff from the Radiological Protection section monitor the surface waters near the state's nuclear power plants to ensure our resources are protected. Next slide, please. That concludes our brief presentation on the proposed reissuance of the NPDES permit for Palisades Power Plant. Before we move on to the question and answer session, I'm going to address how to submit comments in MyEnviro for anyone interested in submitting comments after the public hearing. You should start out on the MyEnviro homepage and select the Public Notice Search option, which is outlined in green on this slide. Next slide, please. That will take you to a page that looks like this. In the site name search bar, type out Palisades, and then select the View/Submit Comment button in the same row as the permit. You can submit comments under either the draft permit or public hearing entries. Next slide. That will take you to this page. You can select the Documents tab to view the draft permit and related documents, or you can select the Add Comment button at the top of the page to take you to the comment submission form. Next slide. This is what that form should look like. The only required items are your name, email address, and comment. However, there are other fields you can fill out, including a drop box in case you'd like to include any attachments. Once filled out, you just have to click Submit. That's it for me. I'm going to hand things back over to Ryan.
Many thanks, Betsy. Great presentation, lots of great information. Yeah, as Betsy mentioned, we're going to start the Q&A session. Before we do, I also just want to mention that that MyEnviro link will be sharing a little bit later on in the chat as well, so you'll have it there. So we'll have our panelists turn their cameras on, and then if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to type them in the Q&A box. This is the only time tonight that we'll be answering questions related to the application. So you can type them in the Q&A box. You can click your raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to raise your hand and ask your question verbally, what we'll do is we'll call on you using your name, and then we'll unmute you to have your chance to answer your question. If there's anybody who's calling in by phone, you can just select #2 on your receiver, and that will raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. And we're kind of just going to go back and forth between the raised hands and the Q&A box. We're going to go until we run out of questions, or until about 6:45, so to make sure we have plenty of time for comments. And I should mention this time here specifically is reserved for questions. So if you have a comment but not a question, hold on to those until we go into the question or the comments part tonight. You'll have your opportunity to make a comment. So the first question is, where, actually it was just answered, but this is a good one. Where can we find radioactive effluent monitoring data for Lake Michigan? It looks like, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer it, Ryan. So we've got environmental data published on the radiological protection page under the Michigan's radiological environmental monitoring program, which we call the MREMP for short. There are historical reports there, and we're also working on getting current data updated in a database in a live format that people can interact with, similar to MyEnviro. So that's something we're actively working on with our GIS team.
All right, many thanks, Jay, for providing that info. So next question, I'm gonna go through a few of these in the Q&A box, and then I'll go to the raised hands. So if you have a question, feel free to keep your hand raised. Part 8, the toxics of NERIPA, does this include tritium?
No, so under the Part 31, which includes the Part 8 rules, Eagle is not authorized to regulate the discharge of radioactivity. That's regulated under the NRC license. If Jason or Mary would like to add anything to that about the NRC license, feel free.
It's exactly what you said. Our responsibility is regulating any and all radioactive sources of potential release or release at the station. So,
Yeah, thanks. Thank you both for answering that question. With this permit, what protections are in place to reduce the impact of thermal pollution?
Sure. So this permit includes a thermal discharge limitation of 2,100 MBTU, which is million British thermal units per hour. That is retained from the previous version of the permit. And I believe that same limit has been in the permit for several versions. Tarek, would you like to add anything? I say
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it just took a while to get to the mute button. Yes. Just one other thing we can add is that this facility uses closed cycle cooling. So there is a much more limited flow of water through their system and much less of an impact on the surface waters from the discharge due to the reduced volume of water that's used for cooling at this facility.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Betsy and Tarek. All right, I'm going to go to a few raised hands here. We have Bruce Davis. Bruce, we are going to unmute you on our end, and then you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question. All right, looks like you're unmuted on our end, Bruce. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on that question. So British thermal units probably doesn't mean much for other people. So can you tell us what temperature they're putting it back into in the lake? And the reason I ask that is because I've been in the lake near this facility many, many times. And if the current is coming into your area, it feels like it's about 105 degrees.
All right, I'm assuming that's a conversion that we'll have to do, unless you know off the top of your head.
I don't know, but
I can speak to that a bit. So while the plant is operational, the temperature of the effluent from the plant varies throughout the year because it depends somewhat on the temperature of the intake water from the lake. But it goes up to around 100 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit at the discharge point. While the plant has not been operating, the increase in temperature between the intake and the discharge is only a couple of degrees Fahrenheit.
Correct, but how is that if Eagle's job is to protect fish and things like that? 110 degrees is pretty severe for fish.
Yeah, so our aquatic biologists analyzed the thermal discharge data from the past several years. This effluent limitation of 2,100 MBTU per hour is based on a thermal plume study that was done several years ago and was determined to be protective of water quality in Lake Michigan, which takes into account protecting aquatic life like fish.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your question, Bruce, and for your answer, Betsy. We have to move on to another one. We got a lot of questions to get to, but thank you. All right, Catherine Barnes, we've got you unmuted on our end. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. I should just be able to hit the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen, which will unmute you to ask the question. All right. All right, Catherine, we're going to come back to you. but you should see a microphone icon that you'll be able to unmute yourself. All right, so another raised hand is Tom Flynn. So Tom, we're going to go to you next. Are you there, Tom? You're unmuted on our end.
Yes, hi. My name's Tom Flynn, and I live in Palisades Park, just south of the plant. My question is a hydrology study undertaken before this license or permit would be renewed? Obviously, the environmental conditions in the lake have changed dramatically, and I think it would impact that last question about the thermal capability. Now the clarity of water due to species of mussels and everything has changed dramatically in the lake. Temperature change is a big deal in terms of algae plumes and things like that. But my question really relates to hydrology study. We have a natural occurring creek within, a few thousand yards of this expulsion of water. And I'm worried about the interruption of the littoral drift and our property owners being able to build beach and things like that. So thanks for taking my question.
Thanks, Tom. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Tara, can you take that one?
So we do the evaluation for the discharge, and the mixing zone that is evaluated, it's looked at as I believe it's a 10-to-1 dilution mix that's considered. So there's a pretty rapid mix at their outfall location offshore, and they have done thermal plume studies in the past, but we didn't have significant concerns with this reissuance with the temperature that the facility is discharging, and they've been well within their technology-based thermal plume limit, and also our water quality-based evaluation of the thermal plume. So we didn't have any significant concerns with that.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Tarek. Catherine Barnes, we're going to try to unmute you one more time and see if we can get a question. Are you there, Catherine?
Yes.
Looks like. All right.
I'm here.
Good.
Yeah, I was wondering, since radioactivity and also certain chemicals are persistent and bioaccumulate, how can you predict that these releases will not harm aquatic species and people? How can you predict that? I mean, it would seem to me that you wouldn't want any releases, period, of any chemicals or radioactivity into the lake.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Catherine.
Sure. So with respect to the non-radioactive pollutants that you mentioned, our limits and requirements in the permit are based on the state water quality standards, which are intended to be protective of water quality for things like fishing, swimming, as well as for aquatic life. And those are based on, in addition to other things, toxicity studies, which consider both acute and chronic effects of these pollutants. And they take into account things like pollutants that are bioaccumulative as well. With respect to the radioactive pollutants, I would have to defer to my NRC colleagues on that one, because that's, again, not regulated under the NPDES permit.
All right. And anything to add?
That's
Jason,
correct. That's correct, Betsy. And yes, there are effluent requirements and modeling for limits for radiological permit, and that'll be part of the NRC's evaluation and their environmental assessment.
All right, thank you. Thanks to both of you. Thanks for the question, Catherine. I'm going to go, we've got lots of questions in the question and answer box. I'm going to go to some of those. One of them is, what is the estimated input/discharge of water in gallons per day?
Sure. So while the amount of water authorized to be discharged in the draft permit is 135.2 million gallons per day. While the plant has been in a decommissioning state, they've been discharging more in the range of 10 to 30 million gallons per day. And going back to when they were operating, they were discharging in the range of 115 million gallons per day most of the time.
All right, thank you. How close is the discharge to drinking water intakes?
I believe the nearest drinking water intake would be in South Haven. I don't know exactly how far away it is. If any of my colleagues know more specifics, feel free to jump in. And Lake Michigan is protected as a drinking water supply, so that's considered in the development of the requirements in this permit, in this draft permit.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Betsy. I'm guessing most of the folks on here were familiar with South Haven, unless anybody knows the distance off the top of your head. Let's see here. Have any of Michigan's nuclear plants had problems with obtaining their NPDES permits? And if so, how was that handled?
I'm not aware of any other nuclear power plants having problems obtaining permits. I know one was recently reissued, the DTE Fermi 2 nuclear power plant. Tarek, do you have something to add?
No, you're correct. We haven't had any significant concerns with any of the reissuances of the NPDES permits for any of those facilities. There's always temperature concerns, and we have done thorough reviews with those with this most recent reissuances, and we didn't have any significant concerns with the discharge from this facility.
Right, thank you. How can radioactive elements be removed from water? My understanding is that tritium hydrogen atoms replace normal hydrogen atoms in water, and thus radioactive water cannot be undone. I'm guessing this is a question for our NRC counterparts. If they have anything they can add or.
There are some tritium groundwater studies being done as part of the effluent monitoring program with the NRC. They can look at that and also the environmental assessment that's being done.
All right, thank you. What is the composition of hydrazine?
Oh, that's something that I think we'd have to get back to you on. I don't know exactly what the composition of hydrazine is. It's a water treatment additive used at the plant as a corrosion inhibitor. And the plant, as well as all permittees, are required to request approval from Eagle to use any water treatment additives. And those requests include submitting to us the ingredient data, the composition data for those water treatment additives.
All right, thank you, Betsy. How often are effluent temps measured, and what safety measures are used to rectify the problem? I'm assuming that's if they're out of compliance.
Yeah, so the draft permit requires temperature to be measured daily. And for compliance, if Jeremy or Jen would like to chime in on that.
Sure. So the facility would be on our list of inspections that we are required to do. So Jeremy is the compliance staff person, so he would visit the site, he would review all their records, and we would take a look at if there are any permit violations that are self-reported or that are noted during his inspection. And then we would utilize our progressive compliance and enforcement strategies to effectively deal with those violations.
And I'll just add that while the temperature is measured daily, it would be reported monthly through our My Enviro system using the discharge monitoring reports.
All right. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go back to the raised hands. Got Michael Keegan. Michael, we're going to unmute you. And then you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. Michael Keegan with No Waste, Michigan. I have a request of Eagle. The NPDES permit is very significant. Major.
Hey, Michael, do you have a question? Because we'll have an opportunity to
Yes,
make
I have a
statement.
question.
Okay.
I'm requesting an extension of time because the deadline of October 7th falls on the same deadline as the major intervention at Palisades with the NRC. So the public, in the public interest, those people who are near the plant are have dual deadlines. So I request that you move this back a 1-week extension. That's my request and question. Thank you.
So the question would be if it can be moved, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And can anybody address or comment on that?
Yeah, feel free to correct me. I think that's something that we could consider.
We can consider that, Betsy.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah, thanks for your question, Michael.
Thank you.
All right. Oops. I think I just lowered the wrong hand. Bruce, if you still had a question, feel free to raise your hand. I might have lowered you. All right, there you go. All right, Bruce, we're going to allow you to unmute your mic and you can ask your question.
So there was a Mr. Flynn that asked a question about the littoral drift. I don't think that question was actually answered. It went back to answering my question about the temperature of the water that was answered. And I'm concerned about, I too am concerned about that littoral drift because that you're taking in 290,000 gallons a minute and you're having to expel 290,000 gallons a minute. That does a tremendous amount to blow that sand from that discharge area out past the first littoral junction where we will never see that sand again. And that's, you know, since the plant has been shut down, some of that, there's other sand from up and down the coast that's come back to help regain make some measures to regain lost land from erosion. But, you know, that's a lot of water that you're moving 130.
So Bruce, we're gonna have to get on to another question because I still want to get a bunch of these in. I guess the question is there anything else we can say about the littoral drifts?
I can speak to that, Ryan. We haven't done the study. We don't, the permit is regulating pollutants. So we haven't done a study. We haven't looked at littoral drift or impacts of beach nourishment or other placement of sand.
All right. Thanks for your question, Bruce, and for answering, Christine. All right. All right, another question. We have plenty more in there. Does Eagle regulate PFAS/forever chemicals? If not, why not? And then is PFAS discharged into Lake Michigan from Palisades?
Yes, so PFAS can be included in NPDES permits. It has been included in some NPDES permits. In the applications, we ask several screening questions to help determine whether PFAS might be a concern in a certain discharge. At Palisades Power Plant, we don't have any particular concerns about PFAS being discharged. They do store a small amount of AFFF for potential fuel fire fighting purposes, which they have never used for an emergency or for training purposes. And yeah, we're not aware of any concern about PFAS in the discharge from Palisades Power Plant.
All right. Thank you, Betsy. Another question is, it says, why 2100 MBTU? It says the Fermi permit has 500 MBTU. So I think the question is, why are the limitations different, I'm assuming, in the power plants?
Sure. So like many of our limits, there are site-specific limitations that are specific to a particular discharge and a particular receiving water. Again, this thermal discharge limit is based on thermal plume study that was done by the plant several years, or done of the discharge several years ago. Tara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's correct. It's just a site-specific evaluation. But we'll go back and look at the basis for the two, and we'll include that in our responsiveness summary.
All right, thank you. Does Holtec prepare its own discharge reports? If so, how can you trust their data?
Yes, so they do prepare their own discharge reports. They do their own monitoring and report that data to us. That data is reviewed by Eagle, and at inspections, we do sometimes do sampling to compare our results with theirs. They're also part of the DMR QA, or Discharge Monitoring Report Quality Assurance Program, which also helps to make sure that they are reporting their data correctly.
Thank you, Betsy. Does Eagle regulate lead and asbestos? Are these toxic substances discharged by Palisade into or onto Lake Michigan as via wastewater discharge into surface water, or airborne discharge falling out onto Lake Michigan's surface? So it seems.
Yeah, Tarek, do you want to take that one?
So we do regulate the discharge of lead. That is something that's monitored, and we do a reasonable potential calculation, and we didn't have any concerns about that. That it's also it's a potential parameter for evaluation with the effluent limitation guidelines for cooling tower blowdown. So that is reviewed, and we don't have any significant concerns with that. As far as asbestos, I'm not aware of any issues related to asbestos or monitoring that is typically done. I don't know if anyone from the NRC or anyone else would have any input in that.
Yeah, we're not aware of any asbestos discharges. If the plant does have asbestos insulation in it, that's handled under normal ocean EPA regulations to dispose of it. And it certainly doesn't go into the lake.
All right, thank you both. At the intake point, what measures are used to prevent aquatic species and detritus from entering?
Sure, yeah, Tarek, do you want to speak to that one?
Yes, so the facility has a cooling water intake structure, and EPA has promulgated requirements for the construction and operation of all cooling water intake structures nationally. And for those facilities that are over the criteria, the department does an evaluation to ensure that the facility is in compliance with those requirements. Again, this facility was originally constructed as a once-through cooling water system, and then was quickly retrofitted to a closed cycle system. And it does have a cooling water intake structure located offshore in an area of lower biological activity. And the through-screen velocities of that structure comply with the requirements. Those through-screen velocities are set at a level to minimize impingement and entrainment of aquatic species. So that is reviewed, and there is requirements specific to the structure and the operation and maintenance of that in the NPDES permit.
All right, thank you, Tarek. We're at time to move on, but I want to make sure we get to a couple more questions that are in here. How often are site inspections done, and are there ever surprise inspections?
Yeah, Jen or Jeremy, can you take that?
Yeah, I can speak on that. Site inspections are done based off what type of facilities they are. This one is considered an EPA major for us, so we are there more frequently and doing more high-level inspections. We tend to do 2 high-level inspections within the permit cycle. We also go there on an as-needed basis in terms of any surprise inspections or unannounced. We typically try to do one of those within a permit cycle as well, which kind of coincides with any sampling. So that way it kind of falls within the cycle and we can kind of do what we need to do when we're out there.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. All right, I think this is going to be the last question so that we have time to move on to the next part of tonight's hearing. Why has Palisades been using 10 to 30 million gallons of water per day since it's been shut down? Is this pumped in and out of the lake? And has it been monitored for contamination? And if so, how?
Sure. So while the plant has been decommissioning, they have continued to need to use water for cooling purposes for their equipment. So that's why they do continue to withdraw water from Lake Michigan and then discharge water to Lake Michigan. There's actually not a whole lot of difference other than volume and thermal discharge between their wastewater discharge when they're operating compared to while they're not operating. So throughout the time they've been decommissioning, they have still been under all of the requirements in their NPDES permit, the same monitoring requirements that they were under while the plant was operating.
All right, thanks, Betsy. I know they said that was the last question, but one final one for us. So what is a permit cycle? I know you mentioned it before. Can you talk about the permit cycle a little bit before we move on?
Sure. So our the NPDES permits are reissued every 5 years so that we have a chance to reevaluate the requirements and make any modifications that are necessary to continue to protect the water quality. So a permit cycle would be about 5 years.
All right, thank you, Betsy. All right, so sorry we didn't get to all of your questions tonight. I will be providing Betsy's contact information in case you want to follow up with some of your questions, and then I'll also be sending the questions to our staff who are on the line tonight. Before we get into the hearing part, which is the next part we're getting up to, where everyone's going to have a chance to make a statement tonight, we want to make sure you're aware of the other ways to submit an official comment. One is through the MyEnviro database. You can provide them directly into MyEnviro via the link that you see in front of you. Or you can send them by mail to Betsy McKay, and I'm going to read this out loud for the people on the phone. Betsy's last name is McKay with Water Resources Division, EGLE. That's at P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 489097958. So if you don't want to make a comment tonight, there's some other ways you can make a comment. As we talked about, it'll be open to October 1st, but it sounded like there might be some room to extend that. All right, and so with that, we're going to go ahead and roll into the public hearing portion of tonight. So I should also mention that we're going to be putting those links in the chat as well, so you'll have those. All right, so I have a hearing statement to kick off the public hearing tonight that I'm going to read. It will give you some instructions and so forth, and we'll kind of walk you through how we're going to do this tonight. All right, so I'm going to start off with the procedures for the hearing. This public hearing will be used to take comments on the proposed reissuance of the National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System permit for Palisades Power Plant, NPDES number MI0001457, located at 27780 Blue Star Memorial Highway, Covert, Van Buren County, Michigan 49049. And I'm going to go through how the comments process will work today. For those of you who pre-registered to attend today's hearing and indicated you'd like to make a comment, we will call your name and unmute your microphone so you can make your comment. We will call your name in the order in which you registered. Once we have called all the names of everyone who indicated they wanted to make a comment during registration, we will open it up to comment from other attendees. At that time, if you have not made a comment and wish to do so, please click the raise hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. If calling in by phone, please hit #2 on your phone to raise your hand. We will call on those who have their hand raised to make a comment in the general order in which their hand was raised. Each person will have 3 minutes to make their comment. I will indicate when you have 1 minute left and when your time has expired. If I indicate your time has expired, please wrap up your comments immediately so we can allow the next person to make their comment. Please be sure to state your name and any organization you represent prior to starting your comment. If you'd like to make a comment but do not wish to make a verbal comment today, you're welcome to submit a written comment to the department. Written comments may be submitted online via our MyEnviro database. A link is being provided in the chat directed to the comment submittal form, as we talked about. Comments can also be submitted to Betsy McKay at Water Resources Division, EGLE, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. The hearing is being recorded and your comments will be part of the information that the department considers in the proposed reissuance of the NPDES permit for Palisades Power Plant. And that's NPDES permit number MI 0001457. Comments received will not be responded to at this time, but will be included in response to public comment documents and be part of the permanent record. All comments and information received will be available in MyEnviro, our online database. And as we mentioned, the public comment period is open until October 7th. All right. Thank you for letting me read that opening statement. We're going to begin taking comments now. So as we just mentioned in the statement, we're going to go in the general order of which people during registration indicated they want to make a comment. I have 9 names. So if you registered and indicated you want to make a comment by this afternoon, this is the list of names I'm going to go by. Everyone's going to have 3 minutes, like we have talked about. You'll see a countdown timer counting back from 3 minutes, so you know how much time you have left. And then when you have 1 minute left, you hear this noise. Oop. It didn't go. 1 second. We'll try it again. You hear this noise. Still didn't hear it. Okay. So I'll just let you know when you have 1 minute left, so that you know when you're getting close to your time. Everyone will have an opportunity to make a comment tonight. So everyone will have that opportunity. If you're making your comment and someone else is on the line that would like to make a comment, it's 1 per person. So you'll have that opportunity and can just let me know if someone else is on the line that would like to make a comment. So with that, we're going to go ahead and begin. And I should mention too, as we talked about, after this list, we'll go to the raised hands. You can raise your hand in Zoom, or you can select #2 if you're on the phone. So my first person is Ed McArdle, and then after Ed will be Kevin Camps. So Ed, we're going to find you in the audience and unmute you. Looks like you're unmuted. You have 3 minutes. You can begin when you're ready, Ed.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm very disturbed by some of the effluent emissions of these highly toxic chemicals. Hydrazine is mentioned, and when you Google some of these chemicals, hydrazine is toxic to humans. It's highly reactive, flammable, and the European Union is looking to ban hydrazine as a rocket fuel. So why would we allow rocket fuel to be emitted into Lake Michigan, into drinking water? There must be some other chemical to take care of the corrosion, in my estimation. Also, Spectra's CT1300 is a very powerful biocide. And I don't think that even though there's limits on that in the permit, still I think we should the IGLA should demand that there be alternatives to that, or not to emit that at all, but to treat that as hazardous waste and dispose of it that way. Also, some of the other chemicals mentioned, chlorine, bromine, chlorides and sulfates, there are some limits on that. And also mercury. There should be a limit on mercury, I believe. So then there's oils and grease. And then if you go to pages 12 and 13 of the permit, you can see, I don't know, maybe
You got about a minute left, Ed.
Okay, but you can see another 100 or so toxic chemicals, chlorinated chemicals, which should not be allowed to be emitted. So that's one statement. I have further comments to send in later. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Ed. Yeah, and I should mention that we'll show that other screen on how to make comments again. So if you decide you have additional comments afterwards, we'll be sharing that. Thank you. All right, so next up is Kevin Camps, and after Kevin is Jan Bodart. So Kevin, you're unmuted, and you can begin your comment when you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Camps, and I serve as radioactive waste specialist at Beyond Nuclear. And I've been watchdogging Palisades for over 30 years. And my comments would include some things that I put into the Q&A, but were not addressed. One of them is the practice by Palisades going back more than half a century now, with permission from the NRC and the state of Michigan, unfortunately, to do what are called batch releases of not only radioactive waste, which, yes, is under NRC jurisdiction, although they are AWOL on their responsibilities in that regard, unfortunately, but also toxic chemicals are in these batch releases. And so I would like to express a real deep concern to Eagle about especially the summertime batch release. If that were to take place on a Saturday, for example, but not only a Saturday, the lake would be full of people at Van Buren State Park, and very likely on the other side of Palisades at Palisades Park Country Club. And yet there's no requirement by the state or by the NRC to warn people who are enjoying the lake, whether swimming or boating or fishing or simply sunbathing on the beach, that there is toxic chemicals and radioactivity coming their way. And I'll just share a story. There was a Michigan Public Service Commission hearing held in Lawrence, I believe, in 2017, where a Palisades Park resident, during her public comment time, which we were calling for Palisades to be shut down for good. Unfortunately, that's not what's proposed now. She described watching her grandchildren swim in the lake when all of a sudden a very likely biocidal chemical treatment was released from Palisades into the lake. It caused a frothing of the water. Nobody knew what it was. She rushed to get her grandchildren out of the lake before the frothing reached them, and I don't think she succeeded in doing that. So there has to be some basic safeguards on human health. I know that you divide by 90 days to say, well, you know, over a season, that on average, people are only exposed to so much toxic chemicals. But for the people who are in the lake when it happens, that is unacceptable. And I guess I'll just close by saying I hope the emergency sirens at Palisades work a little better than the sound effects on this webinar, including during shutdown, because you have all the high-level waste still sitting there, 900 metric tons. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Kevin. That one worked. Yeah, I don't know why the other one isn't. Anyway, yeah, thanks for the comment, Kevin. Next up is Jan Bodart, and after Jan is Tom Flynn.
My comment has to do with the question I asked before. I asked, what is, well, anyway, the timeline that was given is 5 years, so that when you say that there's 2 inspections per permit cycle and maybe 1 surprise inspection per permit cycle, it sounds pretty good. And then you find out that the permit cycle is 5 years, which means that there will be 3 inspections maximum if you decide to do if you decide to do a surprise inspection, there will be 3 maximum in 5 years. And I simply want to object to the idea that the plant is inspected less than once a year. I would think a 6-month or half-year cycle for inspections would be expected. And that's my comment.
Thank you for your comment, Jan. All right. Next up is Tom Flynn, and after Tom will be David Benek. So Tom, looks like you're unmuted. You can begin when you're ready.
Thanks, Ryan. My comment relates to the question I also asked previously, and I appreciate Christine's response to that. Gives me a lot of concern that there hasn't been a hydrology study done with the permission for this volume of water to be expelled into Lake Michigan. And I would strongly urge Eagle to take a strong look at that. The environmental conditions we're seeing today, rain events that are huge amounts of water coming into the lake, the complexity of thermal pollution with the clarity of the water that exists today that didn't exist 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Those are major concerns, and I think it's important. It seems like it's almost procedurally to renew this every 5 years, but I think the conditions that exist today are very different than when the initial permit was issued, and so I'd really strongly encourage you to look at this and look at specifically from a well-respected hydrologist. Thanks, Ryan, for the time.
Oops. Yeah, thanks for your comment, Tom. All right. Actually, it doesn't look like David Benek is on the line. If you're under another name, David, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Or after we get through this list of names, if he logs in, or we'll get to him that way. Catherine Barnes then is next, and after Catherine is Michael Keegan. All right, so it looks like Catherine Barnes isn't on, and Michael Keegan. Oh, Catherine's there. Okay, Catherine.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I'm concerned about a lot of things. One of the things is that the plant itself is embrittled, it's old and cracking, and they've run out of ways to test the integrity of the plant. Engineers have said it's likely to have a meltdown if it's restarted. It needs a lot of parts. It's a money pit. So that is a major concern, is the potential for a meltdown, even without the circumstances of things that could happen like tornadoes and earthquakes and stuff. Just the plant itself is a risk. Another thing that really blows me away is that people, how dare they call it green energy when it's a composite of huge environmental risks, environmental contamination, environmental pollution, not just of the radioactivity like tritium and other elements, but of things that are rust inhibitors. I know for a fact rust inhibitors are highly toxic, and all those other chemicals mentioned are also highly toxic. Do we want this in a general they don't know, or because they aren't seeing it? It's in radioactivity, and gradual pollution is more invisible than other types of pollution, but it's still there, and it's biologically persistent for a long time. Now there's a cancer pocket at Palisades. When it shut down, I believe there's all sorts of things. Those people built those buildings there thinking that they were going to have a life ahead. that it was going to be good there. The plant was going to be shut down. It was going to be decontaminated and
You have about a
returned to
minute
a
left,
green
Catherine.
space the way the NRC promised. And it's just what a terrible disaster and threat it is. There's that, my time up.
You have 38 seconds.
Okay. So I'm concerned also about this huge water use. I mean, 100 to 115 million gallons per day when it's operating, and 10 to 30 million gallons of water per day when it's shut down. So it really hasn't been shut down at all. They've been keep trying to cool the stuff down, even when it's not operating. So my concern too, this is a good use for
now you're out of time, Catherine. So please wrap your comments up and
resources to generation should not be risked. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks for your comments. And again, if anybody has additional comments, we'll provide those other ways to make a comment again too. So next up is Michael Keegan, and then after Michael is Jesse Deerenwater. So Michael, we will unmute you. All right. Now you're on here. Or were. There, okay.
Hello.
All right.
Thank you. Yes. Michael Keegan with Don't Waste Michigan. In August, Holtec announced that they would be installing a new heat exchanger condenser system that would be using more water, potentially up to double the amount of water intake, double the amount of water outtake, because Holtec acknowledged that there is global warming and that the lake temperature is rising. I'm concerned about the thermal pollution coming off this new piece of equipment, which will be new construction. And I don't know if that has been rolled into your current permit, but that is absolutely how they plan to operate within 12 months' time. They have a combination cooling towers and atmospheric venting contingent upon what the lake temperature is and how much you need to cool. But I'm concerned about the creation of microclimates and the vapor coming off of the cooling, which will contain toxics and will be dispensed throughout, impacting the area, flora and fauna, and the lake. So please make sure that this new condenser heat exchanger is baked into the cake when you're doing this new permitting, because this is precisely what they intend to operate. Don't allow this to sneak under the radar. So those are my comments. Thank you for Don't Waste Michigan.
Thanks for your comment, Michael. All right, I didn't see Jesse Deerenwater. Jesse, if you're under another name or by phone, feel free to raise your hand. If you're on phone, you can select #2. Otherwise, we're going to go on to our the last person on my list is Alfred Meyer. So Alfred, we've unmuted you. You can unmute your microphone and begin when you're ready.
Yes, thank you for calling on me. I agree in general with Tom Flynn's comments, but my particular request this evening is that when we consider all the various parameters that go into deciding to approve this discharge permit, and I know that that's a very complicated process, my question is whether this process includes a thorough inclusion of the impacts of the extraordinarily changing weather patterns we're seeing due to climate change. In other words, we just recently we had a record low in Lake Michigan, followed 7 years later by a record high level of the lake. We've seen seiches, we've just seen now, and with the Hurricane Elaine, the extraordinary impacts that these different storm patterns and all the different impacts of climate change are having. And I just want to make sure that in considering this particular discharge permit, that all of those considerations are being included. So that's my question, whether that's been thoroughly included in your analysis. And I should add that I'm affiliated with Physicians for Social Responsibility, the New York chapter.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Alfred. We're not responding to the questions right now, but they all heard your concerns and your question as well. I guess anything else with your comment? Or are you
yeah, I do have a incredible concern about tritium. We're told tritium is naturally occurring, which truly it is. However, not in the concentrations involved with nuclear reactors. And the fact is that this radioactive form of water cannot be separated from water itself. And we human beings are approximately 65% water. So the question to consider becomes, what part of your body would you like that radioactive emanation to be taking place in? Would you like that to be in your brain tissue or your heart muscle or other bodily systems? This is I think, a profound public health question, which receives scant attention. And so I'd like to know how thoroughly you're considering the issue.
Yep, your time is up, Alfred. So please wrap your comments up so we can go to the next person.
That concludes my question about how thoroughly you're also considering the impacts of tritium releases.
All right, thanks for your comment, Alfred. All right, so that is our list of people during registration who want to make a comment. If you have not yet made a comment, feel free to raise your hand in Zoom using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. We're going to make sure everybody has an opportunity to make a comment, one comment per person. If you're on the phone, you can select #2. That will raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. So Jan Bodart, do you have anyone else on the phone who wanted to make a comment, or on are you there, Jan?
Yeah, Alfred's comment made me think about
Jan. Hey, Jan.
Mm-hmm.
It's only one comment per person, unfortunately. So we have to make it fair for everyone. So unless there's someone else on the line, we're going to have to move on to the next person. Thank you. All right, next up is Bob Burkett. So Bob, you are unmuted and you can make your statement when you're ready.
Yeah, I have a question for Terry. He said that they're not using once through cooling. It's now a closed cycle system. And I was going to see if he could identify that and kind of clarify that, because it sounds to me like it's still using once through cooling if you're bringing water in and discharging the water.
All right, we're not responding to comments since this is the period for making statements, but they heard your comment. You can look into that more through Betsy. I'll provide Betsy's telephone number, and then I'm also going to be providing the list of questions to the panelists today.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right. Next up is Jay Hulst. So Jay, you're unmuted on our end. Feel free to unmute yourself and make your statement. Sorry.
you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. So my name is Jacqueline Hulst. I am public. I am a little concerned to hear that Eagle, who provides the permit, cannot provide anything with any of the nuclear materials, that falls to a separate department. So I'm a little concerned of the oversight between the NRC and Eagle and where they connect and meet and how all those dots are getting dotted and T's are getting crossed. So I guess I would like to learn more about how the NRC and Eagle work together to ensure public health and safety. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Jacqueline. All right, is there anybody else on the line who hasn't yet made a comment? Again, to do so, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or select #2 if you're on the phone and would like to make your comment. So we'll give a couple seconds if anyone who hasn't made a comment yet and would like to, to make sure that they have a chance to do so. And if we don't have any more raised hands, we're going to go through a couple other things. There's other ways to make a comment, and also provide you with Betsy's contact info in case you have further questions or in case we didn't get to your questions. I'm still not seeing any raised hands. So what I'll do here is I will read the closing statement, closing out the hearing part for making for the opportunity to make statements, which is where we're at now, and then we'll move on to the next part. So closing statement. As a reminder, public comment period for accepting written comments is open until October 7th. The department will consider all comments received. Written comments may be submitted online in our MyEnviro database. A link is being provided in the chat directly to the comment submittal form. Comments can also be submitted to Betsy McKay at the following address: Water Resources Division, Eagle, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. All right, and you'll also see that on the screen. Thank you for your comments and cooperation. We appreciate your interest and that you took the time to be here today. The public hearing is now closed. Thank you again. And again, we have that information up on the screen. We'll be putting the link in the chat again so that you'll have it to make further comments or by mail to Betsy McKay, Water Resources Division, Eagle, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. All right, and as promised, here's Betsy's contact info in case you have further questions or we weren't able to get to your question. You can contact Betsy McKay at 517-599-3118 or by email at mckayb@michigan.gov. That's mckayb@michigan.gov. All right, and before we wrap tonight, Christine, I'm wondering if we have any closing comments for the audience?
Yes, thank you, Ryan. I want to take the time to thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to join this public time to comment. This is a really important part of the permitting process. So we heard your questions and your concerns, and we've taken note of those. So even if we didn't get to answer them, we will provide a written response. And I do want to add that we will extend the comment period past for an additional week as requested. We understand you have a deadline, so we will accept your comments a week after. Thank you all. I hope you have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Last thing I'll leave everybody with is, again, thank you for all being part of this. We did record this webinar or this public hearing, and we'll be sharing the closed caption recording of the hearing on our website in the next few days. So thank you again, and hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Good night.